Good morning. I'm Josette Sheeran, the President and CEO of the Asia Society. This morning I hold in my hand a small vial of sand. I carry it with me. It is sand from the place where my parents grew up, sand from the place where they were married, sand from the place where they dreamed their dreams and shed their tears, and it is sand from the place where they were buried. Why do I keep it with me? Because it reminds me from where I come. It reminds me that I'm connected not only to the dreams of my parents, but those before them. The science of DNA testing, in fact, tells us today that most of us are connected to places in the world that we didn't even dream we were connected to. I have learned, and now seen through such testing, that I am not only American, not only French and Irish and English and German and Swedish, but also have long brushstrokes linking back across North Africa, the migration from east to west throughout history that swept across Central Asia and also across the Maghreb. We as humanity like to build our walls and say we are separate. We are not in this together. Whatever it may be, but science is proving otherwise. What we know deep in our own souls from the echoing voices of our ancestors, that we are not separate. This brings me to our very urgent gathering today, one that is unique in that it brings together the power of governments, the power of the United Nations and global conventions, together with the cultural, NGO, military, technology, media, and business leaders and experts to explore the urgent threat to our heritage and the treasures of our shared history. Why is it when we stand in the mighty pyramids of Egypt or the haunting beauty of Petra that time stops and eternity seems present? Why is it we feel we're on hallowed ground? It is not just because of the haunting beauty and daunting artistic, engineering, scientific prowess of those who came before us, but it's also because we connect so deeply to our shared heritage and our humanity. The human quest not only to survive, but to thrive and lift our heads and to create beauty and to live on through these creation connects us not only to those behind us, but to those who will follow us. These sites are for no one person or group to take, to remove, to destroy, to pillage, to steal, to covet for themselves, or to use as fuel for death, intimidation, and destruction. And today we are confronted with a new horror, what has been dubbed blood antiquities, as they are being called. We have lost much throughout past years, from Timbuktu to Palmyra to the Buddhas of Afghanistan. But today we seek to find new ideas and new solutions, new coalitions, new energy, ones that build on the remarkable convention adopted on November 16, 1972 by the UNESCO General Conference on the Convention Concerning the Protection of the World's Cultural and Natural Heritage. With 191 nations ratifying, it's one of the most adopted international instruments in history. This convention was inspired, in fact, in 1959 by Egypt's appeal to UNESCO, a unique one, and to the world to help it protect the treasures of Nubia in the Nile Valley from flooding. Today, we will also honor those nations, those archaeologists, those cultural leaders, those monuments men and women who have labored often with very little financial support or support of any kind to protect, preserve our shared heritage. Our calls to action at this time will not be the first, will not be the last, but are perhaps the world's most urgent yet, with hundreds of sites already destroyed in the past year alone. We at Asia Society feel deeply linked to this issue. We were founded 60 years ago by John D. Rockefeller III, who devoted his life to building bridges of understanding and respect with the nations of Asia and the West. He founded it after witnessing the devastation following World War II and being deeply moved by the loss of treasures, and used his own treasure to help rebuild incredible sites such as the Imperial Library of Japan, and to found this institution to continue this work not only through Track 2 dialogues and peace-building efforts, but also, and in policy, and you'll hear from our inaugural president of the Asia Society Policy Institute, Kevin Rudd, in a moment, but also to do the museum shows like the one we have here today, the Treasures of Forgotten Kingdoms, which take us back a millennia to see the remarkable craftsmanship, artisanship of a civilization in the Philippines long before colonial ships arrived, and the remarkable level of these, which are so contemporary and current that they seem relevant today to the design and the aspiration of people today. And so today I want to thank in particular all those who have come together. As I said, it's a unique group. I want to thank His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Al-Jafari, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Iraq, His Excellency Nassar Judeh, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Jordan. Thank you. His Excellency Sameh Hassan Shukri, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Arab Republic of Egypt. The Honorable Julie Bishop, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Commonwealth of Australia, who will be joining us in just a minute. I also, oh, you arrived, thank you, yes. Good to see you. And I also want to thank our partners in this effort, Deborah Lair, who's chair of the Antiquities Coalition, who was described this morning simply with one word, amazing. You'll hear from her later today. Kate Seeley, the Senior Vice President of the Middle East Institute, and of course, UNESCO, of which I will now move to my introduction for Irina Bokova. So I'm now honored to welcome back to Asia Society Dr. Irina Bokova, Director General of UNESCO. She's a graduate of the University of Maryland and Harvard University. She's the first woman and the first Eastern European to lead the organization. She's a leading champion of gender equity, of quality education for all, and more recently she's become the international spokesperson for the campaign to stop illicit traffic of cultural goods, and of course in her role oversees the convention and the World Heritage Sites operations in the world. But I just want to mention something personal on the first time I ever met Irina. And I was the executive director for the United Nations World Food Program. I was in Pakistan on the front lines of epic flooding in September 2nd, 2010 was the day we met. 1/5 of Pakistan, and in particular the Indus Valley, were underwater, 1/5 of the landmass of Pakistan, and 75% of the population was viewed as food insecure due to the effects of the flooding. And for the first time in my experience, a UN agency not really seen on the front lines of human disaster zones typically, the new head, Irina Bokova, showed up. And she talked about the incredible monuments and heritage sites in the Indus Valley and the threat to them, and immediately met with the Prime Minister and his team to make sure efforts were being put in place to protect those. So I knew from that moment she's a woman of action. I knew for that moment we should watch this space. And so in all of her roles, including as Foreign Minister of Bulgaria and in other roles, including this one, she has been a leading advocate and an outspoken advocate of human rights, diversity, and human dignity. Irina, we're so pleased to have you here.
Thank you very much, Josette. Thank you for this very kind introduction, and I'm particularly grateful to hear that from a colleague, from a friend also, and I would say another passionate advocate of multilateralism and what United Nations can do in protecting heritage and protecting human lives at the same time. I think we should always speak about both. And let me also say here in the presence of so many dignitaries, and I would say friends of UNESCO, His Excellency Dr. Ibrahim Al-Jafari, Foreign Minister of Iraq, Mr. Nasser Judeh, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Dr. Sameh Hassan Shukri, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, Her Excellency Julie Bishop, Foreign Minister of Australia, and of course the Honorable Kevin Root, President of the Asia Society Policy Institute, Deborah Lair, another passionate also defender from the Antiquities Coalition for protecting of heritage, the Near Eastern Institute, and so many friends also from the civil society and academia. I think, Josette, you mentioned that it is an urgent meeting, and I cannot but agree with you, because the United Nations tomorrow is taking up a historic moment of adopting a sustainable development agenda. And we are thinking about what the world will be in the next 15 years. And I don't imagine the world in the next 15 years with these precious antiquities, with everything that our ancestors and humanity, different cultures, have left to us. And that is why I think it is so timely that a day before this big historic gathering, we are here together to talk an issue which is, I believe, at the heart of peace and security. Just very recently, a few weeks ago, we met with most of the ministers in Paris for the conference on victims of attacks and abuses on ethnic and religious grounds in the Middle East, co-organized by the Foreign Minister Nasser Judeh and French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius. We met in Cairo before, in mid-May, for the regional conference on cultural property under threat, the cultural and security impact of antiquities theft, spearheaded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, the Ministry of Antiquities and Antiquities Coalition. This was an important moment to scale up regional cooperation, so much in need in the fight against illicit trafficking. I think all these initiatives, I may add also the very important Jordanian initiative about youth and peace and security, and the important area format in the Security Council meeting, and of course the conference that was organized end of August with the active participation of His Highness the Crown Prince. And I think it is very important because culture indeed is under attack today like never before. Last month, on 13 August, the Temple of Bel in Palmyra, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, was destroyed by explosives. The temple was a symbol of millennial dialogue between cultures. And this is why I believe it was destroyed. The challenge we face today is sustained, barbaric, systematic destruction and looting of antiquities. This is what I called a couple of months ago cultural cleansing. A war crime, cultural cleansing is a strategy to spread hatred, to eradicate cultural identities and makers, to deepen sectarian violence. The Museum of Mosul has been vandalized, parts of ancient Hatra have been bulldozed, Nimrud has been dynamited, the Umayyad Mosque in Aleppo has become a battlefield. In Iraq, 2 of the 4 UNESCO World Heritage Sites have been destroyed, Hatra and Ashur, as well as at least 9 other important historic sites. In Syria, all 6 UNESCO World Heritage Sites have been damaged by fighting. 8 sites on the World Heritage tentative list have been damaged, destroyed, or impacted by looting and illegal excavations. Across the region, illegal archaeological excavations have taken on industrial scale, financing violent extremism. Culture has always been the victim of war, but what we see today is new in scale and in nature. Because we do believe that attacks against heritage and culture are in fact attacks against people, against their identities, against their human rights. They are attacks against the humanity we all share. And I would really like to thank you once again, Josette, for your so inspiring, I would say, words at the beginning of this incredible history and heritage that we all share, and that belongs not to one particular community, not even to one people, but to all of us here. And I think nowadays we can say that fundamentally these attacks are attacks against peace. They undermine grounds for reconciliation, they fuel violent extremism taken forward through a global media campaign. And this is why I do believe that cultural cleansing is no longer only a cultural emergency. It is a security issue and a peace-building imperative. This is why, more than ever before, we must stand together to protect cultural heritage and combat illicit trafficking of cultural property. The UNESCO's message, I think, has been quite clear. It is at the heart of all of UNESCO cultural conventions. Of course, the World Heritage Convention, adopted in 1972, which I believe was so much inspired by the big campaign to save the Nubian temples, and that is why Egypt stays at the heart of this quest for protecting of heritage. And also, this year, when we celebrate the 70th anniversary of UNESCO, this message has never been so important. In fact, this is why I went to Iraq twice in the last 10 months. I went to Baghdad, I went to Erbil last November to hand over the World Heritage Certificate for the citadel in Erbil. And then I returned end of March to stand with your government, Mr. Minister, and the people of Iraq for national unity, reconciliation, and protecting your heritage, marvelous heritage. This February, the United Nations Security Council adopted Resolution 2199, for which we have been working very actively with the Security Council, banning the trade of antiquities from Syria to curb financing for violent extremist groups. UNESCO has been tasked to assist member states in implementing this groundbreaking resolution. And I have brought together all our relevant partners, Interpol, United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, the World Customs Organization, UNIDRA, the International Council of Museums, International Council of Sites and Monuments, ICROM, for a stronger action and coordination to create a joint platform for action. Moving forward requires enhancing coordination among law enforcement agencies, experts, museum, auction houses, strengthening legal frameworks, awareness raising, capacity building. And I do believe that implementation already is bearing fruit. Many member states, I would say dozens already of member states, are adjusting and strengthening legislation, capacity building, training have started, and I'm determined to continue. I was just recently, last week I was in Brussels, and I was pleading strongly with the European Union because some of the countries of the European, members of the European Union are the traditional big markets of art. And I was pleading with the European Union to take stronger action, to harmonize legislation, to strengthen also all the regime of the importation of cultural goods. And I think the European Union, the European Parliament are moving very strongly also in this area. And the fight, of course, somebody would ask why we consider the fight against illicit trafficking is so important. I think this is one of the most urgent actions that we have to do nowadays. Of course, we have the legal basis, we have the 45 Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the event of armed conflict. During the World Heritage Committee meeting in Bonn, we launched a global coalition for the protection of cultural heritage. And what is most important, I think these crimes should not be left unpunished. And that is why we're reaching out to the International Criminal Court to ensure those who destroy heritage are brought to justice for war crimes. We need, of course, more intelligence sharing, satellite imagery, stronger cooperation. Working with the United Nations Institute for Training and Research Operational Satellite Application Program, UNOSAT, to monitor heritage through satellites in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, and I think it is an important work that we are doing. I think also that we have to counter this propaganda of hatred. That is why, while being in Baghdad, I went to the University of Baghdad, where with young people we launched the Unite for Heritage campaign to engage young people in sharing messages of respect for cultural diversity, to counter the narrative of violence and hatred, something that we discussed recently also during the Amman conference. And I'm very grateful to many of our partners. Antiquity Coalition was one of the first to join this global campaign. Thank you very much, Deborah. Engaging, it's a huge success to see these young people who care about protecting heritage and who care about maintaining cultural diversity in the Middle East. And I know that sometimes we feel helpless. Sometimes we feel that we should do more. And what can we do when we see war, conflict raging over the region? But let me just mention that in Bosra, in Idlib, in Syria, local parties, encouraged strongly by UNESCO, negotiated special agreements to respect the World Heritage property and the local museum in the name of common values shared by all. Even now, I think we shouldn't be relentless in trying to plant the seeds of peace through local actions focused on culture and heritage. And this is why I think it is so important that we forge these broad coalitions like what we do today. And I think this is the call to action to protect the world heritage that we are hearing in so many of these important gatherings. So once again, let me express my deep conviction that culture today is on the front line of conflict, and it also should be at the heart of all the security, humanitarian, and peace-building measures. This is UNESCO's determination, and I believe this is the spirit of our gathering today. So now, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we spoke about Palmyra. I visited Palmyra before the conflict. I was one of those lucky, probably last persons to visit this incredible site, the Venice in the desert, as it was called, an oasis, a mirage in the desert, that was an embodiment of the dialogue among cultures, seeing the Greco-Roman elements influenced by the Persian culture with the Asian from the Mughals and a local culture that was emerging. And I think this is precisely what extremists did not want to protect, to live, to stay in the world. And I was accompanied by a great archaeologist in person, Dr. Khaled Al-Assad, who was a great friend of UNESCO. He was the one who ensured the inscription of Palmyra on the World Heritage List in 1984. And this was one of the most heinous crimes that extremists did, because tortured, he didn't tell them where some of those movable objects were put in a place to hide them from the extremists, to protect them. And it was an awful crime that they committed in Palmyra itself. I would like to invite you to have a minute of silence in his honor. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Irina, thank you very much. And it reminds us of the courage and bravery and determination and leadership required, I think, to protect these heritage sites.